Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you doing today? Today is the second day of Eid al-Fitr for the Muslims, and today we are going to have a discussion on a topic of a significant, of a philosophical significance, and it's about the Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Actually, Charles Darwin's theory is that human beings evolved from apes, but uh, it is this theory of evolution is not according to the religious values, or if you go like if you follow Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Uh, the basic belief of the Abrahamic religions is that all of the human beings have descended from Hazrat Adam, Prophet Adam alayhi salam, and Hawwa alayhi salam, whom we call who are known in the English world as Adam and Eve. So the world has descended from Adam and Eve, according to the belief of Abrahamic religions. Now, when we see Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, that is that human beings evolved from apes. So now we have to see if Darwin's theory of evolution has something to do in promoting atheism, because we see that atheism developed mainly after the 19th century. So now, Professor Jon V. Kofas is going to elaborate on Darwin's theory of evolution and how it is related to atheism, and what were the religious beliefs of Charles Darwin himself. How are you, Mr. Kofas?
Good evening, Assad. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm fine, thank you. I hope best wishes to all our Muslim brothers for this important holiday. I think you're right. This is a very controversial topic. And the reason is because, and it always has been, and when Charles Darwin published The Origin of the Species in 1859, he knew because he was a Christian, he knew it would be very controversial. In fact, he tried to withhold the publication for quite a while, actually, knowing it would be controversial. Now, I want to begin by pointing out to people that Charles Darwin lived in the 19th century. He was a product of his times, and that evolution, although he is credited with the theory of evolution, and rightly so because he did the empirical work for this, there had been before Darwin, from the mid-18th century until he published his own work in 1859, in other words, roughly 100 years or so, a little bit more than 100 years, there had been at least 70 thinkers, scholars of various backgrounds who had, in fact, dealt with the concept of evolution. So evolution was not new. It's just that Charles Darwin did the empirical work for it. Charles Darwin was a professor of biology, and he went to South America. He went to Brazil, Argentina, he went to Chile, and he spent quite a bit of time in the Galapagos Islands, just east of the coast of, west of the coast of Ecuador. And he studied various species as well as plants and rocks, including plants and rocks. And he returned to England and began to piece together the findings from his empirical research in South America, from Ecuador down to Chile and to Brazil. Now, we have to put Charles Darwin in a historical context. When I studied Charles Darwin, obviously, there was a segment of Darwinism in biology, but really a lot more in when I studied 19th century intellectual history, and I studied the impact that Charles Darwin had on other intellectuals. Now, what's the context of Charles Darwin? The 19th century, especially the second half, which is the period when he publishes The Origin of the Species. And it has a huge impact, immediate impact, in the scientific world, in the biological sciences. When he publishes this work, there is a background, and the background is that this is the beginning of the second revolution, and it is the beginning of many areas in the sciences that revolutionize the industrial and technology. The field of pharmacology. The fact is, and medical science, everything from anesthesia to X-rays to aspirin to vaccines. So you have enormous inventions in the field of medical science and pharmacology. But it's not just in that domain. It's in all the sciences and in technology across the board, everything from the telegraph and electricity. So Charles Darwin has to be put in the context of revolution, which, of course, it alters society, especially Western society. And then from there, because the West, through its colonies, through its imperial reach globally, had such an impact in the global South, it impacted the global South. Now, Charles Darwin did not challenge, did not set out. I want to make sure that everyone understands this. Charles Darwin's goal was not to dethrone religion from its place. I want to make sure everybody understands this. Charles Darwin had no interest in that. However, the effect of his work in biology, evolutionary biology, technically speaking, was that people raised doubts. Let me be specific. The creationism story, as let's call it that, the creationism theory, which was that roughly 6,000 years ago, God, a supreme being, created the universe, and that the universe was created in 6 days, and on the seventh, according to the Bible, God rested. What this theory of creationism was completely thrown out with Darwin's evolutionary biology. For the simple reason is because there had already been studies, by the way, before Darwin, that in fact there were that the age was 4 billion years, not 6,000. And Darwin's work, provided the biological explanation that from simple cells which adapted to their environment and became complex ones, life sprang forth. And this was water-based, and then some of these cells land-based, and all of life starts with simple cells. Now, the idea here was to show, and this was his interest, by the way, in evolutionary biology, that the organisms on our planet that are easily adaptable to their environment survive, and that the organisms that could not adapt to their environment weakened and eventually went extinct. So this was the gist of his contribution, that life begins long before, billions of years, in single cells. In the cellular structure was very simple. They multiply, they become complex, and various life forms evolve from that. Now, creationism, creationists challenged Darwin immediately and argued that this is the material of atheism. And this is rightly so, of course, the topic of today, Darwin and connecting the dots with atheism. The word atheism is classical Greek, by the way, which means no belief in supreme being, no belief in God. Theism means God. Now, the fact is, when we look through history, there are indications that in the 6th century BC and in the 5th century BC, in India and Greece simultaneously, there were thinkers who doubted, for different reasons, different in India than in Greece, and I'll mention. In India, for example, there were thinkers who argued that the universe is eternal. How can something be created that's always been there, always be there? That was that theory. In Greece, there were thinkers who had various theories about the material universe, which discounted it discarded the spiritual aspect of the equation, that there was nothing spiritual about it. In fact, Democritus, one of the Greek thinkers, argued that atoms, and this is long before the theory about atoms in the universe, atoms, atomic particles, in other words, is what make up the universe. Just because this happened recently, just a few days ago, one of the most brilliant scientists of the second half of the 20th century, Peter Higgs, who some people may know the name, he died recently, just a few days ago. Peter Higgs, of course, is known as the father of the theory of the God particle. In the 1960s, he did quite a bit of work on how the boson, this subatomic particle, is at the core of the creation of the universe. This is further extension of what Darwin never delved into this domain. This is theory of Peter Higgs was a theoretical physicist, by the way, and it's called the God particle for obvious reasons, to argue. And again, Peter Higgs was not interested in proving there's no existence of God, by the way. We'll get more into this. But the idea of scientists, in other words, words, what I'm trying to say here is from classical times to Peter Higgs, who a few days ago passed away, you know, particle theory, is not to set out to dispute religion. For them, many of them, at least for them, since it's our main focus here today, religion has a role in its own domain, that his domain was evolutionary biology, and he wanted to be true to how life evolved on this planet. And like I said, was well aware, by the way, like I said, he delayed as much as he could publication. He was waiting to see what other things were going to be published, to see when he would publish his own work. In any case, atheism, of course, like I said, has origins in the 5th and 6th century in Greece and India. The fact is that it was atheism in classical times, in many parts of the classical world. Many people will probably be surprised to find this out. Atheism meant anyone who not necessarily didn't believe in God, but disputed or denied the official religion of the state. So an atheist could be anyone who said the state religion, the state official religion, is not the one I follow. I deny the validity of that, and I accept something of my own. That was an atheist, because technically speaking, they didn't believe in the gods of the state. So this is very important to point out. An agnostic, another classical Greek word, which means God can't be known to humans. God is unknowable, and I don't know. An agnostic would say, I don't know if there's a God. It's unknowable to me. An agnostic would also, for many, fall in the same category as an atheist, although really technically their position is, I don't know. So we have a broader definition of atheism than what a lot of people might think. And then, of course, there are the so-called heretics within the same faith, regardless of what official religion that is. There are people who deviate from the orthodoxy, and then those in the orthodoxy mainstream say, well, he's an atheist, that's a heretic, because they don't follow the mainstream position. So the fact is that atheism does have many dimensions. Now, atheism really becomes it's obviously very difficult to find it. No one would dare express atheism throughout the Middle Ages, but you begin to see more open expressions of atheism in the West, in Europe. During the 16th century, in the Reformation. In fact, that's the first time that we do begin to see here and there expressions of atheism, namely the denial that there is a higher being, and the idea that that higher being created the universe, created mankind, and that there is an afterlife. Now, why the Reformation? Because the Reformation questioned the institution. So in the 16th century, Calvinists and Lutherans, and then in the 17th century, other offshoots of reformers, Christian reformers, questioned the main institution in the West, which in Western Christendom, which was the Catholic Church. So questioning the institution, some went to the extreme. Again, some went to the extreme of denying not just the institution of the main religion, namely the Catholicism, the Catholic Church, but they denied the existence of God. They denied that heaven existed or hell existed, that afterlife existed, that once you're dead, that's it. So we have here in the Reformation the first signs of that. In the 17th century, during the age of science, the scientific revolution, we have top scientists, Copernicus and Newton. Copernicus with the idea of a heliocentric universe. That heliocentric is a Greek word. Helio, it's the sun, centric, centered. The idea before that, the Christian church believed that it was a geocentric universe, that the earth was the center of the universe. Copernicus comes along and argues, well, that's not true at all. So he invalidates the official position of the church. Then Newtonian physics comes along, and Newton argues, well, actually, okay, he was not going to challenge Christianity. He was a Christian. But he pointed out that there are laws that can be mathematically proven about how the universe works. They are known to man. These are not mysteries left to God, which is what the Christians believe. You can't know. He can't know the laws of God, the laws of nature, the laws of the universe, because that's getting inside the mind of God. And that in itself, according to the Catholic Church, was a sin, by the way. You can't delve into the mind of God. They were warned not to do that, by the way. So what we have here is, in fact, the church dominating science based on dogma and based on tradition, long-standing, as you pointed out in the introduction, long-standing tradition, going back to biblical times, to that the three monotheistic religions, again, as you pointed out, the three monotheists on which the pillars on which the three monotheistic religion rested. So these people come along in the 17th century, okay, in physics and theoretical physics, and argue, well, actually, this is how the universe really operates. Again, the goal was not to challenge the church at all. Actually, they wanted to be as loyal. The 17th century was rather conservative. And century people wanted, these scientists were a religious institution. However, they took it for granted that religion belonged in the realm of personal faith and morality, and that over here in theoretical physics, there was something else. Now, why I'm pointing this out is because Darwin comes out of that mindset. Charles Darwin, in the Victorian era of the 19th century England, a university professor, obviously, had some of the same concerns, even more so because he realized that the last thing he wanted to do is invalidate the people's belief in God or challenge the institution of the church. In the 18th century, by the way, we do have some very openly atheist thinkers, very openly atheist thinkers. By the 18th century, by the way, what happens is that the challenge, atheism takes on political connotations. And we see this by the French Revolution. The British thinker and member of parliament, Edmund Burke, wrote that the French revolutionaries are atheists. And in fact, he wrote this because he argued these people, Maximilien Robespierre, for example, one of the leaders of the revolution, was a follower of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And a number of the French revolutionaries were, in fact, deists. They were not atheists, very few that are leaning that far. But they were deists. In other words, they believed in the existence of one powerful being minus the institution. So the question is, what does atheism mean in the 18th century, especially by the time we come to the French Revolution? Even the American Revolution, by the way, a lot of people who I'm sure who have studied American history and the American Revolutionary War probably know that many of the founding fathers of the United States were actually deists. They didn't believe in the institution of the church. They believed in one power. So what does atheism mean? It takes on political connotations by the late 18th century. Why? Because they challenged the political status quo. And what a better way to do that than to deny that institution, the faith, the institution, the religious institution. Historically, the religious institutions, this is from ancient times, the Romans, persecuted the Christians. They persecuted the Christians not because they cared about the dogma they were preaching. They persecuted them because they were disloyal to the empire. Disloyalty to the empire is what they were concerned about. So religion has been used for more than 2,000 years as a way, by those who challenge it, as a way to challenge the status quo. So you challenge the status quo through religion because religion has historically been on the side of the status quo, on the side of the elites, the side of the government. So what did those who want to oppose the status quo, want to alter the status quo, bring about a new social order? They challenge religion. And there are some of those that go as far as challenging God. This was not, I'm going to make sure people understand, I've said it already, I'll say it again. This was not the goal of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was an evolutionary biologist who was really interested in knowing how did life start, how did it evolve, why are some species extinct and others have survived. That was at the core of his thought, not let's see how I can use this challenge. He had no interest in doing that. Charles Darwin died in 1882, and the reason that is important, that same year, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, the existentialist philosopher, made that famous statement that people use to this day: God is dead. We have killed him. Implying that human beings created God, and now they've killed him. And what he meant by that is that technology, science, the year Darwin died, 1882, science and technology has, in fact, done this, and that the institutions around science and technology, which obviously human beings build institutions, as we know, continue to build institutions around science and technology, have done this. So Nietzsche was, as a philosopher, not a scientist, not a theoretical physicist, not an evolutionary biologist, just a philosopher, argued that, by the way, this is what I think is happening in our society. We have killed God because we have a new society. Nietzsche was observing what was happening in Europe and arguing this is the result. I'm gonna pause right there because it's been half an hour that I've been talking, and I'm gonna ask you to jump in and please ask whatever you like, and then I'll continue. I'll continue on with other aspects of this because this is, I have to say, by the way, very controversial topic. When whenever I bring it up with friends, they go, well, but who made these? Who is responsible for what Darwin is talking about? And Darwin never said that just because life evolved in the manner that it did and species adapted in the manner that it did, he didn't pass judgment on that, by the way. And then immediately, by the way, defenders of faith, regardless of faith, well, this doesn't mean there is no God. Nothing is written here means there is no God. Okay, fine, we'll accept the science of it, but it doesn't mean. Now there were others who did, and we'll talk about that next. But go ahead. Ask me anything you want at this point.
Okay, first of all, I want to clarify that we do not intend to generate any controversy. The purpose is to, just deconstruct the relation between Darwin's evolution theory and atheism. The reason is that the evolution theory contrasts with the religious beliefs. Because the basic belief of religion is from what we gain from our religious books, our holy scriptures, is that human beings did not evolve from apes. God created them simply, just as He created other creatures. But if we consider Darwin's evolution theory, then we have these type of questions that come to our mind. So the question is, what was Darwin's belief at the time of his death? I mean, did he remain? Did he stay Christian throughout his life,
Yeah,
or and what were his
yeah,
own views on this evolution theory? Did he find it? Did he consider it correct throughout his life, or did he? Uh, did he think that it was wrong or anything like? Did he agree with it throughout his life, or did he disagree at
yes. He
some point?
he he actually expanded on the theory. Wrote another work a few years later on how species. Assad, he was really focused on evolutionary biology. Um, in all honesty, he was not interested. I mean, he knew in the back of his mind this was controversial stuff, but he was really interested in finding out why, for example, sea turtles, live as long as they do, and some salamanders have become extinct. The dinosaur has become extinct. Why some species become extinct, others live? Why some birds have become extinct, others survive? In other words, the focus of Charles Darwin was how the environment, the natural environment, um, permits species to either survive or perish, eventually perish. And he was narrowly focused on that. And then the further study he did, to answer your question, no, he did not change his mind. He remained religious, but he was religious. He was not challenging. He was not after challenging the church. He was interested in evolutionary biology. He was interested in the science of it. And he did the next study, and the next study was on sexual selection, which was that all species are driven by instinct to survive and to perpetuate their own species from bees to humans. So, and that's where he continued. He continued along that road. Why is it? What is it that all species have in common? And the issue here was to survive and perpetuate their own species. Now, human beings, as we know, and God knows we've talked about this a lot, unfortunately, are also extremely destructive and self-destructive. They destroy their own species. And unfortunately, they destroy there are a lot of species, by the way, who do destroy to survive. Another observation. But there's a difference between destroying to survive and destroying for ideological reasons, for political reasons. And the other observation, of course, this is post-Darwin, but it's based on Darwin thought, is that human beings have some human beings, thank God there are not more, there are fewer, have a propensity to destroy and enjoy destroying their own species. So what we have here is, this is, again, evolutionary biology makes a contribution to this. I think that Darwin's focus, again, I stress that Darwin's focus was how nature endows the various species to carry on for millions of years and to survive. And then, of course, what is it that makes others go extinct? Again, and that's the subject I'm going to mention next, is what happens when this work, evolutionary biology, the field of evolutionary biology, becomes part of school training. It's adopted. It became very controversial, as you can imagine. There were scientists who refused to have anything to do with it. There were others who did slowly go along with evolutionary biology. The United States became one of the countries, interestingly enough, one of the more secular countries. The United States gravely resisted. And there were states, because the United States, at the state level, there's a lot of legislative and political autonomy. There were states that refused it illegal to teach evolutionary biology by Darwin. It was illegal to teach in the schools. And the textbooks had to remain true to creationism. There was a famous case in 1923. It was made into a motion picture in 1960 by Stanley Kramer. It became a hugely controversial topic. It's called Inherit the Wind. And it was called the monkey trial because, as you mentioned, the idea that humans come from monkeys. And this was in the state of Tennessee. Usually the southern states and some of the northwest states in the United States were the most conservative. And there was a biologist, Scopes. This was the Scopes trial. And they went to court. And the case was tried. And it was really Darwin versus creationism. Now, Darwin was not interested in challenging, as I said, religion, and he was not interested in promoting atheism at all. Darwin was only interested in the um, he was only interested in the science and the biology of his theory. However, the Darwinism becomes politicized, especially in the 20th century. And it becomes politicized, heavily politicized, for two reasons. And that's the next thing I want to develop, the next issue. Once the Bolshevik Revolution broke out in 1917, and Vladimir Lenin announced that the official religion is atheism, okay? And that science is going to replace religious instruction, and religious instruction is not going to have any place in schools. That becomes, in Western countries especially, including the United States, that becomes a politicized and a political issue. So atheists are communists. Well, in fact, the fact is that atheists have nothing to do with communism. And Darwin was certainly neither an atheist nor a communist. But it becomes politicized after the Bolshevik Revolution. Just like the French Revolution was portrayed as a movement of atheists, as the French Revolution was that a revolution of atheists.
Mr. Kofas,
So was the communist revolution. We have is a problem. Are we having connection problems, I guess?
okay. Not on my side. Not on my side.
It's on my side. It's unfortunately on my side. Okay. I wanna repeat the point that I made because it probably was not heard. The creationism versus Darwinism debate became especially intense. And the reason in 1923 there was a legal case, a court case in the state of Tennessee, and it was argued by the former Secretary of State, William Jennings Bryan, by the way. He argued in favor of creationism against the Darwinists. 1923 was 6 years after Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky had started the Bolshevik Revolution. By then, the Bolsheviks were thoroughly in charge, firmly in charge of Russia, of the Soviet Union. And there were communist parties. Many people probably don't really started. There were communist parties everywhere in the world. And so what happened was that the entire world had enclaves favoring having difficulty. Okay? Connection problems. Sorry, I apologize about the connection problems. In any case, the Scopes trial, by the way, the Darwinists, the judge ruled in favor of evolutionary biology. However, state after state, all the way until the 21st century, has challenged the, evolutionary biology. Creationism was still taught. Interestingly enough, throughout the 20th century, there was a segment of scientists who refused. It wasn't a majority, but there were about a third of them in high school that refused to teach evolutionary biology. And as you pointed out, the stigma was I'm a monkey. I'm human. I am made in the image of God. How can I come from a monkey? Humans are made in the image of God, not in the image of a monkey. So there was that. Invariably, evolutionary biology was linked to communists and then liberals. So the issue was politicized. The science of it was taken out, and the politics entered. So it became a political issue. This became a heavily political issue. And that is where we are. Now, I want to talk about the future of atheism and evolutionary biology in the age of high tech and in the age of artificial. I think, by the way, atheism has risen in the Western world. It has risen considerably, but it doesn't have much to do with science, and it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that there are scientific developments and that society is more materialistic. It has to do more or less with the protest that human beings feel against religious institutions. For example, they will invariably use, as they did during the Reformation 400 years ago, the corruption of the church. The other issue here, which is very important, is that religious institutions invariably have been linked to political movements, whether it's Hinduism under Modi or the evangelicals who are for creationism against evolutionary biology in the United States behind Trump. So the fact is that the science has nothing to do with this issue. It has become an issue that is political, and atheism itself is not debated on the merits. It's not like Immanuel Kant debating, for example, Jean-Paul Sartre, who was an atheist, by the way. Jean-Paul Sartre and Immanuel Kant, if they lived, they could sit down and talk about this issue from a philosophical point of view, but and debated on philosophical merits. Atheism is much more a political issue and used by populist right-wingers against their opponents who tend to be liberal or left. So that is where we're at. Now, with artificial intelligence and the high-tech era we're in, there is an assumption that the era of robotics and artificial intelligence is the new God. It's the new, how can artificial intelligence, how can humans create intelligent machines? What more proof do you humans are the new God? Because there's the machine. Well, Actually, religions themselves have many, not all. When I did some research on this in connection with my own work, artificial intelligence, and the chapter that I had, I was using, I was about artificial intelligence. I discovered was that the number of religions have fully accepted technology and adapted technology, including artificial intelligence, by the way. When people read, for example, I'll give you one example. Just recently, there was exposure in a popular magazine in the United States of a Christian evangelical. His name is John Osteen, a Christian evangelical who has seen millions and millions of dollars, has private jet, I don't know how many cars, 34 cars, and so forth. Lives in a palatial home. Always by to argue, well, this is the person who's going to tell me about the existence of God. In other words, it goes back to the point that 400 years ago, Martin Luther was making. These people are more materialistic. They're more earthy than the earth itself. They're really all about the money. So the hypocrisy aspect has added a lot. And in the age of skepticism and fake news that we live in, with social media and communication worldwide, people are more aware that that religion itself is political. Because when a religious leader takes sides, and they, like I said, not just in the United States, evangelicals in the United States, but the America, for example, Brazil, Bolsonaro, that creates doubt in terms of the validity of the faith itself. Now, there is something else here which I want to point out, and this is even more, a little bit more controversial, and that is even the people who believe, because when I taught actually at a Catholic university for a number of years, at a Jesuit university. I'm a product of Jesuit education. I got my PhD from a Jesuit university. I used to go out in the School of Theology and taught there was a time when most of my students were seminarians. In other words, these were people in training to become priests. It's amazing what you discover when you talk one-on-one with people. And human beings have a propensity to doubt, and they should doubt. And Friedrich Nietzsche was right that they should doubt. And he was right that one of the greatest traits in a human being is to doubt, because this is how you learn. Dogmatism is not. If you approach something from a dogmatic perspective, well, then you've already solved, you've achieved total knowledge of everything. You don't need to continue. This is why Einstein, when asked what about the theory of relativity and where do we go here from here in theoretical physics, he argued that this is what we know until further notice. We'll see what the future holds, because knowledge is never ending. And people who are religious and claim to be religious still have doubts. Even people who are religious, who are theists, have doubts. And this doesn't mean they're atheists, on the contrary. But we do want to point out that this is part of human nature, is to doubt. So theism doesn't surprise me. It is, however, I want to make sure that all people understand all the studies that have been done and looking at religious proclivities of societies and human beings from ancient times to the present, it is more natural, inclining for human beings to gravitate to religion and to believe than it is not to believe. And even atheists like Sartre argued that it takes enormous courage to defy, to say, you know what, there is nothing, it's just I'm all alone. There is no, there's no afterlife, there's no God. This is a sense of complete hopelessness and a sense of abandon of yeah, that we are in fact that human beings are not part of something a higher spirit, a higher being. That is very difficult for many people to accept, and they don't, by the way. The majority of the people, and they are tested especially when they're ill. That's when they start praying, even if they have doubts, even if they're agnostics. So theism is really much more natural, if you will, to human beings than atheism. Atheism is a minority. Atheism remains minority, by the way. And let me point out that one of the last points I want to make here. When the Soviet Union collapsed, now the official, it's not just Russia, the Russian Federation, but all of the Soviet republics. The official religion in the Soviet republics was atheism. Yet, when it was over, instantly, you have the popularity of religion throughout the Soviet republics, including from the Baltic states all the way to, and this is Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike, but this is not about Christians, everybody. So you have an immediate propensity to rush to religion right after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the republics break off, and they're independent, and they're now free to choose religion or not, and they choose religion. So you see, this is, and people don't, they didn't have to, but they do. They did flock to religion. And you can interpret it sociologically that they did it for political reasons, they did it for all sorts of reasons, but they didn't have to. They chose to do that. So there is, in fact, something innate in human beings, and we see it from ancient times, from the era of Mesopotamia to the present, that this prevails among human beings. Okay. I've been talking about an hour. Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Kofas, there is one thing very important that I want to point out, and that is that whenever we listen to debates between theism and atheism, the believers of atheism who do not believe in religion, who do not believe in the existence of God, who think that all the teachings that we and all the events that we have studied in the religious scriptures are mythological. They have no existence in reality. They never existed in history. So these atheists support Darwin's theory of evolution to justify their atheism. They think that that I mean, the Darwin's theory of evolution is the basis of their atheism. I have often heard these debates, and they usually cite Charles Darwin's theory of evolution and all these scientific developments, and they think that, and the Big Bang theory as well. The Big Bang theory is that the universe came into being by itself, while the religious belief is that God created the universe. So the basic there these 2 points, Darwin's theory of evolution and the Big Bang theory, are often justifications for atheists in these debates.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
what do you have to say about that?
Yes, I agree. I think that the two domains, you're absolutely correct, Hassan. The two domains are theoretical physics and evolutionary biology. The two science-based domains, theoretical physics and evolutionary biology. Okay, now they use that even before the Big Bang, before Charles Darwin, and this is why I pointed this out. They were atheists, okay? And they were atheists for different reasons. So my point here is, in answer to your question, they use this to validate and to justify and to provide arguments based on science and so on. According to theoretical physics, according to evolutionary biology, the fact is this is a self-sustaining universe, and life has evolved on its own through the evolutionary process. So where does God fit in? And this is essentially what you're saying, is that this is their argument. Okay, they are using this, as I said, to invalidate the theism, in other words, the existence of God argument. And they're doing it for various reasons. My point here today, and I started by saying this very clearly, is separate out the politics and the ideology of it from the science. My point here today is to say this is, and you correctly in the title wrote connecting the dots. My point is that the dots are connected by people in their own heads, because Darwin didn't connect any dots. You see? In other words, if you want to disprove, I remember I was in a metaphysics class, and someone said, well, how can we know what's after, that there's afterlife? Has anybody come back? And of course, there was a debate in the class, in philosophy class, about proving afterlife. Clearly, empirically, you can't prove that, because you can't. Because once something has perished, it doesn't come back. And then from there, they deduce, well, if that's the case, then I just prove there's no God. You see, people have used all sorts of arguments, and will continue to use even more in the future. The God particle in Peter Higgs, I'm only mentioning him because the man, perished in his 90s just recently. It was another one that was used. They argue, well, Peter Higgs just validated everything. Here's how the universe was really created. Subatomic particle, which is the essence of energy in the universe. Now, here's when I was in the teaching at the seminarians. They studied this stuff, and they argued, well, who created the subatomic particle? In other words, the point for them was that ultimately, if you want to develop an ontological argument for the existence of God, you can. Immanuel Kant argued he wasn't going to bother with that, but you can by saying, well, what's behind that? And there is no into that. You can always, go back to the Aristotelian argument of a prime mover of the universe, a prime mover of the universe. This is why some Christians, by the way, became Aristotelians, because Aristotle provided. Christianity, by the way, has an enormous amount of Greek philosophy in it, Aristotelianism and Platonism. So, because Aristotle talked about the prime mover of the universe, and Plato about the good, which Christians argued, well, that's God, the ultimate force in the good, God. So there is, you can provide arguments. Believe me, I've studied enough philosophy. I've been in enough philosophical debates that there is no, you can prove that if you want. And atheists will, do bring up these arguments. My goal is not to any of that. My goal is to say, well, this is the science, this is how society evolved. And really, there is a practical application to evolutionary biology, and that is to for species to better adapt to their environment. So how can the planet, how human beings better manage the planet so all species better adapt to their environment and survive, and we perpetuate the species instead of destroying it. This is a very constructive approach, by the way, rather than trying to use it to negate something which is in the domain of private faith and morality and people's choice and so forth. And that's my position, at least.
Okay, questions are finished on my part. If there is any final message that you want to convey to the viewers, please you can give that message.
Yeah, I would. I would urge everyone to study as much of evolutionary biology as they would religion. I believe that each domain, I studied religion. I studied many religions of the world, and I feel enriched by it. By the way, people should not underestimate how much they can learn, how much they can expand their horizons by studying religion. They can learn about human nature, about society, about compassion. They can learn so much. The question, of course, is what do you learn from evolutionary biology? That's a specific field for that has scientific applications for those who are interested in pursuing the field of biology. So, as a retired university professor, my advice to everyone is to, and that's what university, the idea of university is to study everything, to not to politicize a discipline. Study it, learn from it. You enrich yourself with discipline. And people would be surprised. There were students I had, especially undergraduates, who would say, well, how am I going to use, I want to become an accountant. Why do I need to learn about Buddhism? And this is an example, for example. And you would be surprised how much your life is enhanced. Human life is enhanced. The human mind is enhanced by learning as much as possible. Socrates was right that you can never know. Knowledge is infinite. You can never know enough. Knowledge is infinite. And so I would urge everyone to study as much about religion as they would science. That's my final message.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's very important that we need to ensure that the motive of this conversation was not to hurt anyone's religious sentiments or to target any atheistic community. We do not intend to hurt any religion. We do not intend to hurt any atheist. We do not intend to hurt anyone. We are just trying to understand that atheists use Darwin's theory of evolution, the evolutionary biology, to justify that a religion has no existence in reality or historically, and it is just a mythological uh, tradition created by people. So that was it, and I have nothing against anyone. Mr. Kofas has nothing against anyone. We are just deconstructing a major thought, a major philosophy, and so uh, these major mindsets which impacted the world's political atmosphere in the past 2 centuries, especially during the 20th century and in the world moving forward. I'm hopeful that this conversation has been helpful for you, it has been useful for you, and you have gained something from it. Please share your opinions in the comment section and share this video with all of your friends, family, colleagues, everyone. And one more thing that's most important, please subscribe our channel and press the bell icon so you can get the notifications of our next conversations with Mr. Jon V. Kofas on different topics. We have already discussed his one novel, Slaves to Gods and Demons, just a few days back, and we will also be discussing his next two novels. You have written three novels, right?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
so we will be discussing two of his next novels. We have already discussed one, and hopefully, we will be back soon. Please support us. Please share our content with everyone who wants to learn, who wants to understand the perspectives behind the political and social and economical atmosphere currently impacting our daily lives. Thank you for your time. Bye bye.